There have been many times in my career where I've made mistakes, sometimes big mistakes, ones that I won't even share.
The decisions we made were the best possible decision we could with the data and experience we had to that time.
Why do people like watching other people's journeys? Sometimes I think it's for the chaos and the train wreck, to be honest.
The best way out is through. The best way to own your story is to tell your story.
Welcome back to the Lunch Break ABCs. I am joined today by Christine Smith, by Ben Albert, by Andrew Biernat, and together we are the Lunch Break ABCs. We are here to bring you strategies and tools and insights and wisdom, and even sometimes just a helping hand to help you over something that you are facing in your life or your business, or maybe just to give you that one idea that can propel your business to the next level. Our topics are not created by ourselves. Our topics that we chat about are created and voted by you, the viewer. And you chose for this episode, embrace the journey. You want to know how you can embrace the journey to achieve success. And talking about journey is so important because where are we spending most of our time in our lives? It is the journey. Our life is the journey. Our goals, we get there and we're there for a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, maybe a week for some of these bigger goals. But what are we on to next? The next goal, and embracing the journey that leads us there. So how can we embrace this journey? What is the journey? What does it mean? That's what we're going to be talking about today. Be sure to go in the comments. Let us know where you're tuning in from. We want to hear from you. We want to hear your questions, your input, and all that fun stuff. But let's hear from our lunch break team here. What does embracing the journey to achieve success mean to you?
But before we dive deep in, I wanted to apologize, and I'll just do it on air because I wasn't late, but I was like 30 seconds early. And if you're not super early, you're basically late. And the reason I was running late is I was in a mastermind, and a mentor of mine was sharing ultimately a life experience he was going through basically in real time. You know, he was booking someone to be on the podcast, some uneasy vibes in terms of it just didn't feel like there was alignment. And he was walking through his story and his journey. And I was like sitting here like getting anxiety, like I gotta go live, but I want to hear the end of the story. I wonder if they'll be mad if I'm a minute late. And I ended up not being able to finish the story. And the first thing I'm going to do when we're done with this live is reach back out to this gentleman and try to get the conclusion, because hearing that story, hearing that his feelings and his emotions and experience through the journey of basically him just telling a story was captivating to me. So I just wanted to apologize. That's why I was running late today. But when someone can share their journey, their story, their truth, it hooks people. It definitely hooks me. I don't know about you guys.
What is it about the journey, do you think, that hooked you to want to know more? Because when you watch a movie, when you read a book, especially fiction, like the stories are what hooks you in. Why do you think you were so captivated to stay and listen to that? Is it because we relate to it? We go through it ourselves? What do you think it is for you, Ben?
We relate to it. And I'm not going to retell his story half-baked, but, you know, he has a podcast. He was booking someone to be on the show. The person that was going to come on the show was acting like a weirdo and not appreciating boundaries. So then he had to have a hard conversation about, I actually don't want you to be on the show anymore. That would be authentic. And I've been through scenarios like that. And I've actually felt uneasy about someone before and still had them on and actually regretted it later. So since he's been through something super similar as me and handled it more mature than I did possibly, I can learn from him. And it is that story and relating to it and seeing how people can go on a similar journey but have different outcomes that I find pretty fascinating at times.
I think what you brought up there, just the idea of story, is a journey. You know, we each have our own story. We each have a journey that we're going on, whether it's a micro journey or a macro journey. And I think what's really interesting, Ben, is you were captivated by the story. You had to leave in the middle of it. And I feel like that is that is like so perfect for how we can maybe look at our own lives. Is it's like you're listening to someone else's story, like in Ben's case, and you're captivated. I can't wait to know what happens next. I want to know what comes next, what comes next, what comes next. And that's how we feel when we're in our own moment. What is my next thing? Where am I going next? How does this end? Am I going to be successful? Am I going to get the job? And I feel like we miss out on just the emotions that are there, that tension, that excitement, that anticipation, that joy, that fear. And I feel like we so often try to just move through emotions. I know at least I'm that way. I try and get kind of through and past and kind of get to the thing, get to the experience, get to the high, and then kind of toss to the side and kind of move on to the next thing, kind of like a used can of soda. And I feel like, Ben, I'm actually a little envious of you right now, because right now you get to stew in this world of unknown, where you're not quite sure how that story ended. And that's something I'm trying to be a better steward of in my own life, is the open-endedness, the not knowing what's coming next, and just trying to be okay with that, trying to have fun with that, trying to enjoy that, to sit in that, and to just explore. So really quickly, my journey's been interesting the past few years. I was in the personal training industry for about 8 years, really enjoyed it. COVID was not awesome to the personal training industry. And so I started rethinking a lot of things, like many people in that time. And the great resignation is real. I can raise my hand and say I was a part of that twice. And so I ended up leaving that career, starting a new one. And the first thing I did was try to start a business. Then I hopped into another career, and then I hopped into another career. And so it was a really interesting time. And the biggest takeaway I have from that, especially with the anxiety of like trying to start a business and I don't know what I'm doing, I don't know who I'm serving or what even I'm providing, and just kind of trying to figure things out, is that, man, the journey is actually a lot of fun. And right now I'm starting to come to terms with, I just really like having options. I like having choices. I like having the ability to do things, versus like I'm at the pinnacle. I'm retired. I've finally made it. My kids are graduated. I've got the yacht or whatever, whatever the dream is. I'm just doing my best to try and be settled in. This is fun. This is a really cool spot to be.
And look at what you're doing now, brother. I mean, you just had that giant event where you were literally sharing the stage with several people who I look up to and who helped me, especially during a dark time. Like, where you were to where you are now is unbelievable. And it's in those moments where you're on the stage with these people that we looked up to, these people that everyone knows their name. And it's like, I'm here now. And at that point, it's like, well, how can I really be in this present moment and really soak up this moment? Because if we skip those moments, then what's it all for, right? We're just constantly going without being in this moment, realizing where we are now. So I commend you for that, man. I want to hear about it after how that went, but that's such a huge accomplishment for you. So well done to you, Andrew. That's huge.
Thank you.
How about you, Christine?
So going back to your original question, like, why do people like watching other people's journeys? Sometimes I think it's for the chaos and the train wreck, to be honest. We all can't look away from stuff like that. And I think it's because we want to make sure that they're not some superhuman, right? Like, oh, well, if they can do it, I can do it, sort of thing. And I think that's why we gravitate to those stories, right? Like, that might be why Ben really liked that story, because we really like to hear when people get through something bad, right? We like to hear when the tragedy is behind them, but they took something from that, right? They're not just still dealing with whatever that issue is, or whatever, they've moved past it. But I don't think that makes the journey any easier. I'm like Andrew. I have a really hard time, one, with the unknown, and then dealing with the like this emotional like roller coaster, right? Like, I just want to get to the point where, okay, like, I don't need to go through the roller coaster part. Just tell me where I'm going to be at the end, right? What is that just going to feel like? And I think we've all read stories about people who are millionaires, right? And that money didn't make a difference. But we all look at that and we're like, well, you're lying. It would make a difference for me, right? It'll make me feel this or that. And trying to envision what that feeling is, especially if you're into like manifesting and things like that. Well, how are you going to feel in that moment? And there's no way to truly know until, you've made it to that journey. And I think when we're on the journey, we sometimes forget where we're going. Like, oh, we want to get to this end result, but we kind of like blur everything in the middle. We don't sit in it. We don't watch it and feel it and experience it. We're like, all right, I just got to get through this in order to get to that next step, which is unfortunate because, you know, by the time we're in our 60s, 70s, and 80s, and we're like, I wish I had spent more time doing something, right? And I think that's the hardest thing about being an entrepreneur, and especially being like a very, at least for myself anyway, like going. Like I'm very, very fast paced with everything that I do. Everything. Like everything that I do is very fast paced. To slow down is very hard. I've had to do that on maternity leave. I've been like forced to slow down just because I wasn't allowed to do anything. And it was very hard for me. And then I was like, oh, wow, my healing process was better this time because I wasn't doing anything. Who knew? That slowing down could be a good thing, right? But really taking the time, because I think you really need to slow down to speed up, right? You need to think about some of these things rather than just kind of responding or reacting all the time, which is what we're all kind of programmed to do. You make decisions after you've gotten all the information, or you got most of the information, and go from there and see, okay, is this en route to where I need to go? I know in my journey it's changed many times and it'll continue to change many times, but if at the end of the day it doesn't make me happy or get me closer to where I envision myself, maybe I shouldn't be doing it.
Yeah, I like that slow down to speed up idea. And I think that what we find is, and I speak for myself, but I think I'm speaking for other people too, you tell me, is we have this idea of what we want. And really a lot of it starts from that. A lot of it starts from, what is this vision that I want? What is this business that I want to create? What's the purpose of this? Who do I want to help? And we have that goal. And a lot of the times, in order to reach that goal, what's included in this journey that we're not necessarily told up front is all of the mundane activities and little things that go into making that goal and dream an actual reality. Like when I was 24, I'm 29 now. When I was 24, I knew that I wanted to host these giant events. And I went to a Tony Robbins event. He was a giant inspiration for me. And I was like, I want to do this. I want to be on the stage hosting this event, bringing in all of my friends who I know will make a positive impact on these people who were here to learn and to grow and to get better. And I decided this is what I want to do. So I went all in at the company. I delivered all the trainings. I started the conferences. I did all these things in order to boost my skills at presentations and speaking and organization and all these things. And then I said, I'm going to do it. I'm going to host my first event, right? So I'm going to make this goal a reality. And I told this before. I hosted the event. I ran probably $3,000 of Facebook ads to a free event in the Albany area where I live. And I had 4 people show up. And some of them were family. And I was like, okay, this is going to be a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. And it was very discouraging. And I didn't want to give up necessarily, but I was like, how am I going to do this? Like, if I put $3,000 towards this, no one showed up, what am I going to do? And I feel that one element that really helped me to embrace that journey, or that leg of my journey, was getting around other people who had a similar goal as me, or people who were already doing what I'm doing. Because I really started to make progress when, I believe it was 2018, when I joined the National Speaker Association, the NSA, the Connecticut chapter specifically. And I felt so alien in that room. I was the young kid. Everyone else is in their 50s and their 60s, some in their 70s, who are successful speakers. Not all of them. Some of them are where I was. They just retired. They're looking to speak. They're looking to grow a speaking business. And I was like, wow, a website goes into this, building a brand goes into this, creating frequent content goes into this, prospecting, and then the act of reaching out to people, and all of these things goes into this, when I had no idea that that was the case. I thought you ran an ad, put a cool picture to it, and everyone would show up. And I quickly had to learn, I have to become really good at, and not just really good at, but I have to learn how to embrace the mundane activities that aren't as sexy. Like, I got to get really good at using LinkedIn Sales Navigator to begin a relationship with a client, with a company, in order to get in there and chat with them. They're not just going to hire someone they don't know. So one thing that might be good for us to talk about is, how do you embrace the mundane? How do you embrace the little tasks and things that come along with the journey that might not necessarily be your interest or your strong suit.
What's coming to mind for me is just being curious in the moment. Now, imagine a book, a long, lengthy book, and just reading the chapter titles. Did you learn anything just reading the chapter titles? You could level up and get a Cliff Notes version and get the 5-minute version and understand the core concepts. But were you really emotionally invested? Do you really understand the examples? Can you talk about it as an expert? You need to read, maybe not every word, you can skim. You need to read the book to truly understand the message. And you need to be there in the moment, reading the words, symbolically, typing into the computer, listening to the person, doing the mundane tasks. Setting up an ad is not always fun. Setting up targeted audience is not always fun. People love it. But those are the words in each chapter. None of it's accomplished unless we go through. Have you ever read a book and been like, wow, every single word was amazing? If so, tell me what book, because I want to read it. I get bored sometimes, but I understand that if I continue, I'm going to get the lesson, I'm going to get the message, and I'll skim through certain parts. You can even delegate certain parts, maybe not reading a book, but if something truly doesn't bring you joy, maybe you delegate that section, but you still need to be embracing with curiosity each and every moment, or else it's going to be boring, or else it's going to be mundane, or else you're going to miss an interesting opportunity. I don't think any of us is going to have this problem because we're all, paired up. But imagine you're looking for a significant other, but you're too busy on your phone that you walk by the perfect person that you could have met, but you weren't there reading the environment to understand that they're right in front of you. That's what happens when we get jaded, when we stop being curious, and we don't embrace the suck. We don't embrace the mundane. Any of us could open our eyes and look at something and have something interesting to think about. The shadow on my board over here, the size of this water, the shape of it. I'm on a tangent, but there's always something, even in the most mundane circumstances, that we can be compelled by if we choose to. But I do believe it's a choice.
I agree 100%. And it's interesting because we're, all three of us, or all four of us, three of you and me, we're all podcasters. That's something that we have invested in. And a lot of times you don't know this up front, but man, podcasting's a lot of work. You have to try and book the guests, have a good plan, have a back end of whatever's going to happen. You have to edit the audio. Even minimal editing still takes time. You have to upload it. You got to get show notes, put some promotional pieces together, actually promote it, engage with the people that are engaging with. Like there's a lot that goes into creating and running a podcast. And some of that is mundane. Some of that is not fun. Some of that is not my love language, right? And I know for me, I've run through fits and spurts where there's times where I'm just really engaged and energized. And it's taken me a little bit of time to figure out, when I am engaged versus when I'm not engaged, what is it? Why am I engaged now? And why aren't I engaged, or why wasn't I engaged in the past? And it really is coming back to, is this tying into what I'm supposed to be doing? Is this tying into my purpose? Does this serve what I'm doing? And, for me, I've already rebranded my podcast once. I would not be shocked if I rebranded it again. Because I'm starting to get into a phase now where it's like, it's become more of a grind. It's become less like something that I want to do. And I think a lot of that is it's not quite aligning with where I'm seeing myself headed. And it's not quite matched up with what I want to do. And so for me, it's all about alignment. If things aren't lining up with where I want to go, it's very hard for me to do mundane, crummy things. Now it's easy to do super fun things, even if it's not quite aligned, going doing a speaking gig or doing something else like speaking, it's fun. But if it's not quite aligned, at least I'm still enjoying it. But if it's something I don't enjoy and it's not aligned, at least I personally really start to feel it. And I think a lot of people are the same way. And so what I've had to do is, why am I feeling that way? Why am I experiencing that? Why isn't this aligned? And sometimes like I stop doing something and then eventually I have to figure out why I stopped doing it because something was amiss, something wasn't matched up. And then I kind of have to go through that thought process of how do I reboot this in such a way that it's lining up?
So interestingly, I had this conversation yesterday with somebody that I was introduced to for my networking group's Ripple Effects. And we got off topic because she asked me what it was like to have kids because she's not there yet and own a business and just be busy all the time, right? And I was like, the things that other people don't tell you is that it's not even growing yourself professionally. You still have to maintain all of the other things, right? Like just as a human being, let's just take off everything else. Like you still have to maintain yourself, right? Like you have to put food in your body, you have to drink water and in some sort of good quantity, right? You got to make sure you're somewhat active. Like there's all these things. And that's on top of if you have to take care of someone else, if you have a spouse you need to spend time with, you spend time with your friends, like there's all these things. And it almost seems like everything piles up, right? I would say I agree with you, Andrew. Like sometimes things just kind of fall off and I don't know why. I don't know if you could hear her like squealing. I don't know why they fall off, but I think sometimes they fall off because we're like, oh, something else came in and we had to do that thing. And then it just became that new habit, right? So it's super tough to keep up with everything. It's impossible. You can't do it all.
Yeah, I think on this point, we just had I would say your name, but it says LinkedIn user. So maybe you can let us know in another comment what your name is so I can properly address you. But it says, as you get older, the mundane is understood to be more important than we thought, so that you learn to enjoy it a lot more. And I absolutely agree. And like what you said, Andrew, like even the idea of, yeah, you go to the speaking gig and that's a lot of fun, but what's involved in going to that speaking gig? Everything else, the other 99% of things, the content, the posting, the conversations with the event organizer, the conversations with the attendees, the stuff that happens afterwards. Like we see, especially the quote of you're celebrated in public for all of the work that you did in private. We're doing all these things behind the scene, and what we're doing behind the scenes, that is the journey. And we just had that individual commented one more time, and it says Ben is their name. So Ben, great to have you. Post your last name, Ben. I'm curious to see if we're already connected. If we're not, we need to make that happen. But thanks for commenting. If you're watching, be sure to comment, what journey are you currently navigating in your business? And real quick, if it's okay with you guys to kind of go from what we did last time in our last conversation, we talked about the power and the effectiveness of the acronym.
Oh, so powerful.
Exactly. And I would love to share an acronym when it comes to embracing the journey. And I'm going to breeze through it because we got a lot more to cover. But the acronym is EMBRACE. So it's a big one. And the E stands for enjoy. You've got to enjoy the journey. I have a friend, I won't name them obviously, but they were in a long-term relationship for 4 years. And they even had like a stepchild out of this and everything. And it didn't work out. And I remember she was explaining her journey and explaining her story as almost like it was a waste of 4 years. And she said, I've wasted a giant chunk of my life in my 20s. What am I going to do with all this time? And it's like, well, I'd like to invite you to consider, what if you didn't waste this time? What if this time has actually been teaching you something that you wouldn't be able to get unless you had just spent 4 years in a relationship that didn't work out, right? So if there's a part of your journey that you're not necessarily happy with or necessarily proud of, it's okay. Like ask yourself, what did you learn from this experience that you could have only learned from going through that experience? Like me with my event that I just mentioned, like Andrew with the rebranding of his podcast, like Ben just reading the titles of the chapters. And Ben, I'm glad that you learned to read the words and not just the titles, because that's a giant takeaway, man. Well, I love that analogy. I know I'm just messing with you. I know you're smiling over there. Ben Gibson, thanks for posting your last name. It's great to have you, brother. We love your contributions, and that's one of the parts of the acronym here. But the second letter is M, master. Master something, right? If you can master something, it makes the journey that much better. If you can become best in the world at something, it makes the journey that much better. The first The B stands for believe. If you believe in what you're doing, if you believe in the outcome, then it makes navigating that journey that much better, right? Ways to believe is to tell it to yourself over and over. It's to tell a lot of people. It's to really ask, what's the why behind this? What happens if I don't achieve this outcome? The R in embrace stands for remember, right? Remember the wins. Along the journey, we have a lot of wins, but we also have a lot of downfalls. We have a lot of shortcomings. Embrace the shortcomings because they teach you, but at the same time, what are the wins that you've had along the way that you can count on, that you can celebrate? Because if you stack up those wins, you begin to find more wins. The A stands for act, take action. Christine mentioned that with the birth of her second daughter, she has been forced to slow down. I'm with you, Christine. I've been forced to slow down too, not always willingly, right? We'll be in the heat of something and then the baby will cry. And it's like, well, obviously I've got to tend to the baby. And then you're completely sideways, you're completely in a different direction. But I've learned to really do my best to be in that moment, knowing that even though I was sidetracked, this is more important in this given moment because they won't be this age again. So act, continue to do one thing every single day. The C stands for contribute, do something to give. We all do that through our podcast. We do it through other ways as well. But ask yourself, how do you currently contribute? Is it with money? Are you donating to a cause? Are you giving your time? Are you donating through the service that you provide? Whatever it might be. And the final E is, once again, enjoy. There's two E's and both stand for enjoy. Whatever you can do to enjoy the mundane, to enjoy the journey. Like for me, like I'm curious as to what you guys might do to enjoy the mundane. We already mentioned some things, but like when I'm doing the little things, when I'm prospecting, when I'm creating the content, I'll put on a lo-fi playlist in the background. I'll connect to my Bluetooth speaker. I'll play some lo-fi. I'll play some orchestra. I'll play some what do they call it? The old style music. I'll think of the word. Maybe you guys can chime in there and help me, like Mozart and Beethoven, whatever. Oh, Baroque music. I'll play some of that. It activates a part of your brain. That's what I've been told, at least from a Google search, but there is science behind that. And I'll do something to enjoy the time that I'm spending. And Ben just wrote, holy cow, something happened, and I have dual broadcast with about 15-second delay. Oh, I'm sorry about that, Ben. Hope it's not like that for everyone else. But that's embrace. What can you do to embrace the journey? And that's a little acronym that I wanted to share with you guys.
Dude, I love it. I'm getting strong dodgeball vibes. Dodge, duck, dip, dive, and dodge. Enjoy at the start and enjoy at the end. But I think that's so perfect though. Putting it in there twice, like as funny as that is, I do see it as almost twice as important as anything else in there, and starting with it and ending with it, because that really is what makes the journey, because our life is a journey. Eventually we're going to die. Hopefully it's a while from now, but we don't know that. And if you're putting off your enjoyment in the hopes of more enjoyment in the future, there's a balance to that, right? Because to go the opposite way and to only live in joy, that's hedonistic, right? And that typically leads to short-term consequences, or major long-term consequences as well. And, only putting off joy, like I'll have joy in the future. I'll have joy when I get promoted. I'll have joy when I retire, when my 401k hits a certain amount, or when I'm finally successful as an entrepreneur, right? Putting off enjoying things until then, that doesn't make sense either. And so there's this kind of middle zone of making sure that we find the joy in what we're doing and just create joy and enjoy the journey, the trip, what we're up to. And so, I've looked at my life now as more of an adventure. I'm more of an explorer in my life. I imagine myself kind of on a ship crossing the ocean, and like, I kind of don't know where I'm going. But at the same time, like maybe there's something right around the corner, just over the horizon. Maybe it's the next cool thing. But I know right now on the ship that I'm on, things are pretty awesome. I'm really enjoying what's going on. And I've structured my life in such a way that I can enjoy it now, but also enjoy where I'm heading. Also enjoy what's about to happen.
Well said, dude. Real quick before you go, Ben, I just wanted to restate the acronym. Someone asked, what's the last E? So it's enjoy, master, believe, remember, act, contribute, and then dodgeball vibes, enjoy once again. That's the final E.
Brandon, I was going to do the same thing. And as you were going through the acronym, I was like, I wonder what's coming next. And I was hoping for A, you wouldn't do achieve. And you didn't. A was act. And the reason I was hoping A wasn't achieved is I'm thinking in my head, there is no end destination in the journey. You can achieve something, but then you continue on to the journey. And we already touched on this. We don't choose when it ends. So I love that nothing on here is reach $1 million, achieve buying a house, marriage. Enjoy, master, believe, remember, act, contribute, and enjoy. This isn't about reaching X goal. Now, granted, setting X goal, reaching it, or even not reaching it, but still becoming a better human in pursuit of it is fantastic. But I love that none of this is a scripted, we need to achieve this goal to embrace the journey. It's really the embracing the journey that's the goal in itself. Does that make sense? I'm reflecting here.
That was beautiful. I 100% agree. And someone wrote, what was hedonistic? And I don't know what they're referring to, but I had to look up what hedonistic even means. And the definition is engaged in the pursuit of pleasure. And then the second part, I don't know if this goes along with it, but sensually self-indulgent. So I don't know what that second part means, but hedonistic would be a great word to put in there. I didn't know what it meant, so maybe it wouldn't be great for an acronym, but that's absolutely true. And I loved your synopsis of it because it's not to do with achievement. Achievement's great. It feels good. But again, achievement is that 1%. The journey is the 99% that leads to the achievement.
So I'll answer that question. Someone asking like, what was hedonistic? So I'll look at my life, right? I'm 7 years sober at this point. But when I was not, that was a very hedonistic time in my life, right? Alcohol and having fun and going out and doing stuff. That was top priority. Pleasure in the moment. Let's go do the thing. Let's have a blast. And I put off enjoyment in the future because I was trying to enjoy so much now. And my enjoyment over time got less and less and less. My hangovers got worse. My ability to do better work got worse. My feelings of accomplishment were degraded. My feelings of relationship and connection with people got worse and worse. Because I focused so much on immediate joy, I lost out on longer term joy. And so, but then the opposite's true for a lot of us too, especially entrepreneurs, is we're grinding, we're putting in the hours, we're putting in the work, and I'm gonna have more family time. I'm gonna do more of this stuff later. I'm gonna just achieve this one thing. I just gotta get this next thing, and then I'll have the joy. And that's the wrong way to go too, right? Both ends of that are not going to get you where you need to go. That's not journey focused. That's end result focused. And I know for me, that didn't work. It didn't work all that well. And I've been blessed to have had my eyes opened a bit ago for that.
You see, so someone wrote, hedonistic came across as a closed caption on the text of this podcast. I don't know which of us said that. If any one of us did say that. Oh, did Andrew? You did say it. Okay. Wow. What a word, brother. What a great word. Someone said to make it a little bit easier, maybe next time you should just use the word kinky. I think that's a good idea. I would have understood it if you used that word. Can we say that on LinkedIn? Well, we just did.
Just did.
Yeah, we'll keep that. I love that. Someone said that they would like us to send them a replay, which is cool. But the final question that they had is, when can you embrace the journey? So I think the key word there is, when can you embrace it? Well, what if you could embrace it right now? And you might be saying, well, that's easier said than done. Right now, I'm in the thick of it. This is the most challenging time. This is the most difficult time. But I invite you, and you don't have to do this. I just simply invite you to do it. I invite you to consider, what if you could enjoy it right now? What if you could find one part of this journey and maybe even change the word journey with story? What if we could change just a few words of this story in order for you to find a glimpse of benefit? What if there was a benefit for you inside of this difficult time? And while that could be it could be a giant difficulty, it could be a breakup, it could be a divorce, it could be the loss of a loved one, the loss of a very close loved one even. And it can be almost impossible to find the solace in that, and even dark to find the solace in that. But what if there was one good thing that could come out of this difficult part of this journey so that you could embrace it now? What would that one thing be? And maybe you guys have some other input on how someone can embrace a journey now, especially if it's not a fun part or a very difficult part of that journey.
Got to get rid of the word enjoy for this one, because you can embrace it and not be enjoying it in the moment. You can still believe, you can still remember, you can still act. In this case, you might not enjoy it, but at least you get that perspective that you know it's leading you somewhere better. So this is a scenario where we might actually have to find a second E, because in some cases, enjoy might not be there. But I do think we can embrace it even if it sucks. Does that make sense?
Yeah, there's a big difference between those two words. 100%.
I think it's knowing that it's not forever.
Yeah.
Like, whatever the journey is, it could be something that's not great. It could be something that's good too. But realizing like there's light at the end of the tunnel, you're going to end this journey and start a new one. So if this hasn't been great, you know, are you going to do something to change it? Or is this just something that's just going to be, I just got to wait till it's over and then I can move on. You know, realizing that is super helpful because it kind of gives your brain a little bit of closure. Like, okay, it's not forever, even though in the moment you're like, everything's terrible, right? Because we don't worry about the good things usually, right? We don't worry about that particular piece. And I know I mentioned earlier, like I read just recently, I've been reading a lot of articles about people that retire early, and they make all these sacrifices, like significant, right? They're not spending money on things they enjoy, or they're not going on vacation, or they're holding out on all these things because they want to retire, you know, significantly early, right? And their biggest regret is the fact that they waited so long to enjoy their lives, right? And, you know, is saving for retirement important? Sure. But is it worth sacrificing today and enjoying things with people that you can today that you may not be able to tomorrow? And realizing that, unfortunately, not everybody is on the same timeline as you.
There was a really great comment here. Someone wrote, and I'm curious to hear what your comments are on this, guys. It can be challenging when you are so deep in shame on this particular journey. And that is absolutely true. And there have been many times in my career where I've made mistakes, sometimes big mistakes, ones that I won't even share, that I had a lot of shame around. Situations where I made a mistake and I lost the trust of some of the people closest to me. And over time, and again, time is a giant part of that, just giving it time, right? Because time heals all wounds, as you know, the old adage. Over time, you have more chances to quote unquote redeem yourself. You have more chances to take one of the letters of that acronym and act, and take different actions, take better actions that are more aligned with what you want. But if you think, and to the person who wrote that, it doesn't show your name, it just says LinkedIn user, when it comes to that shame that you're feeling, I'd like to ask you realistically, how often are you feeling that shame? Because if I had to guess, you're not feeling shameful your entire day. You're maybe feeling shameful as you lie asleep at night, maybe not while you're sleeping. Maybe you're dreaming and you're ashamed in your dreams, although I doubt it. But maybe as you're falling asleep, you feel shameful. Maybe when you think about this certain situation, you feel shameful. And I bet that you only feel shameful when you're looking into the past. Not to say that the past isn't important, but there's the past, there's the present, and there's the future. Generally, we're only feeling shameful when we're looking into the past. Generally, we're only feeling anxious when we're looking into the future, right? But how do we feel generally when we're in this moment now, when you can truly be aware of this moment now, when you can truly ask yourself, okay, I felt shameful because I made this decision back then, but you can't go back there and change the decision that you made. So what can you do instead moving forward? And someone wrote that to embrace is to own it without regret. And the reality is, if you feel shameful over something, number one, if it was to someone else, maybe that other person doesn't even remember what you did. Maybe that group of people don't even remember what you did. So who is bearing the burden of this shame? Only you, right? So what would happen if you did decide to embrace whatever happened in the past? You'd be able to live it without regret, and you've learned from that situation. So my question for you, maybe you'll comment this below. We can't see who you are on the stream, but we'll see it afterwards. What will you do moving forward so that you can finally embrace the past? Because you can't go back there and change it.
I love that. And I want to kind of open up another piece of that, which is, or maybe dig deeper into some of the stuff you brought up, right? Because you brought up anxiousness, looking into the future, kind of that shameful kind of depression, all that kind of pulled into one, looking at the past. And, I'll just share on my journey. I was heavily involved in some kind of toxic shame and shame spirals and all that in my drinking days. And it took me a while to work out of that when I stopped drinking. And the best thing to do is, just like Brandon was talking about, is yes, embrace it. But how do you embrace it, right? Like, if you're feeling shameful about it, the last thing you want to do is be near that. The last thing you want to do is think about that, be around it, or talk about it. And unfortunately, the best way out is through. The best way to own your story is to tell your story. The best way to take control of the narrative is to start saying what the narrative is. What happened? What is that thing that you are ashamed of? And lean into it. Right? When I was drinking a lot, that was a very shameful time of my life. I'm not proud that I drank a lot. I'm not proud of a lot of the stuff that I did when I was wasted. But looking at that, I've leaned into that. I own that part of my story. I don't necessarily like it. I don't necessarily have joy in that, but I have embraced it. I have taken that and I own it. That's part of my past. That's part of what's gotten to me where I am. And I talk about it and I share about it. And so for me, just talking in groups of strangers was super helpful. And, there's seriously so much power in bringing some of your personal darkness to light. And there's a lot of ways to do that. Don't start on Facebook. That's usually not the best place to start airing that stuff, right? Start in close company. Start with friends. Start with a counselor. Start with a trusted friend. Start with a group of strangers and start sharing truly of yourself. And it gets you to a place where not only do you start to get distance and get some perspective on your story, but you'll see that people still accept you, even though that happened, even though you are, quote unquote, that way, whatever that way is. And so by sharing, you open up the opportunity to let that darkness come to light and let other people pour into you and accept you as you are.
Beautifully said. And it's so funny because you're holding Ellie right now, Christine, and I'll be holding Leo, who's my son. And by the way, someone wrote in the comments, Christine, congrats on the baby. Congrats. There she is. She's live. Right. And it's funny because I'll be holding Leo and I'll just like make jokes with my wife, Bree, next to me. And I'll say, oh, you're going to have your heart broken one day. You're going to get married one day. You're going to have so many difficulties and challenges. And I'll even say, like, you're going to tell us that you hate us one day and all these things. I have like a sense of dark humor, but the reality is it's true. Right. And those are going to all be parts of his journey and Ellie's journey. And they don't even know it yet. Right. But it's those situations that are really going to shape who he is and who they are and who we are in general. And someone wrote, shame is an outlier for high value people. That's a very interesting way of putting it. And I would agree. I mean, would you rather feel nothing or would you rather feel shameful? Because if you feel shameful, it means you took action, right? Even if the action isn't something that you necessarily were happy about, it means you took action. And then someone else wrote, values are actions over time. So a bad act is one data point on a trend, right? So a big way that maybe in the future we could avoid that shame or we could avoid that feeling or emotion that we don't necessarily want to experience, although I believe all emotions have value, is what are your top 3 values? Like you probably get this all the time too, Ben. Like when I interview people on the broadcast, one of the top things that comes up when it comes to reinventing yourself is what are your core values? Like it comes up so often, yet everyone has a different way of explaining it. But if you go on Google, like I'll do right now, and you type in top list of values, you're going to have like 100 different values come up, like I just did right here. And I wish I could share my screen, but there's too many of us on the screen to do that. But some values are integrity, loyalty, leadership, kindness, wisdom, success, humility. I bet that if your top 3 values were integrity, loyalty, and honesty, I guarantee it would be very, very far and few between that you would take an action that would cause you to feel shameful. So what would you say are your top 3 values? And then someone else said, you don't avoid shame with values. It is just that the shame won't define you. Your values will. We got a lot of wisdom from this audience. We got to see who some of these guys are when we actually go to the LinkedIn post. We got to have some of you on the show. We can have more than 4 people. So it'd be really cool to have some of you guys join us in our next month's conversation. We can figure that out later. But excellent contributions. Keep it going, guys. We love hearing what your questions are and what your input is.
Yeah, I need a break because the chat box is way more insightful than I am. So bring one of them on.
I think shame is an interesting feeling that people have. And I think it can stem from you did something wrong or you went down the wrong way. But I think a lot of it's also environmental. Like other people are influencing you and not in a good way. I can't tell you how often I have been shamed for one thing or another. Like I've been shamed for being tall. I've been shamed for my body type. Let's put a different topic, but it's crazy how much someone can have an influence over you and make you feel those things, even though it's not actually true. It's not reality. And I think sometimes the self-shame that we feel in whatever that situation is sometimes derived from other people telling us oh, well, I told you so. You shouldn't have done this. And now look what happened. Right. Now look what you did. And it's hard to not spiral in some of those situations.
I'm thinking just to categorize. So there's externally, there's shame. It's amazing we're talking about shame when we went from journey to shame, and I'm loving this topic. I'm happy you went here. So external, it's oftentimes people projecting their own shame and insecurities onto you, and then you internalizing it as something's wrong with you, but it's really their issue that they're projecting onto you. And then there's the super internal stuff, like decision-based, where I made a poor decision. I'm ashamed by this decision. And in that scenario, I have a million examples of that. Whether this is true or not, this mindset shift helped me. Brian Bogert, actually, I bring him up all the time. A good friend of mine taught me this. The decisions we made were the best possible decision we could with the data and experience we had to that time. Now, you could argue I could have made a better decision. I should have made a better decision. I'm better than that. With the data, experience, and the momental experience, what happened in the moment, you made the best decision you could based on your journey up until that moment. So you have 2 options. Continuing going back to that moment, saying, what if, I should have, why, or being like, wow, my journey led me to this moment, and now it led me past it. Because the decisions we make really are our future self, or our previous self, making the best decision that we could. And it wasn't always the right one. And our future self is going to appreciate that we had that lesson. So that's my opinion. Just the mindset shift of even the shitty things I've done was my best possible decision with the data points I had and the journey I was on. We can move on from that. That's Brian Bogert. That's not me. He's the one who taught it to me.
Somebody in the chat asked, can you please repeat that quote? So I'm just going to repeat what this person said. You don't avoid shame with values. It is just that the shame won't define you. Your values will. Yeah, that's a really great quote. Whoever wrote that, you got to write that down and use it. Just like Ben, you say a lot of things. I'm like, you got to write that down and use it. And the last thing I'd like to ask of each of us here is what are your closing thoughts when it comes to the journey? And for my closing thoughts, I'll say that it comes from Jennifer Hendricks-Fogg, who I've had on my show. And she's a close friend of mine. She's amazing. Christine, you know her as well. And she has a process for staying resilient during the journey, especially during the difficult times. And it's a 3-part process. Sometimes we're surviving on the journey. Sometimes everything is happening to us, although I believe everything happens for us, but it might not seem like that in the moment that you're in. So sometimes we're surviving. Other times we are resting and recovering from the survival. So sometimes we are recouping. We just had a baby, so sometimes you're sleeping more. You're trying to catch up on sleep. Sometimes you just sold a business. You're trying to figure out what the next step is for you. So sometimes you're recovering. And then other times you're thriving. Everything's going great. You can think back to a time in your life where everything was going great. Things were just happening, all good. Everything, all the bad things were just glancing off of you, or they were just glancing blows. So sometimes you are thriving, sometimes you're recovering, and sometimes you are surviving. And really it comes down to which season are you in right now? Because it's just that. The seasons are constantly changing, and the awareness of what season you're in will help you to better navigate that journey while you're on it. What about you guys? What are your top takeaways? Final statements.
Let's go, Christine.
It's like, I don't know how to follow up with that. I mean, I think just keeping your eye on the ball, so to speak, right? Like, there's going to be good and bad things that you're going to have to go through. Like, you're going to have to do it, and just do it. Like, it might not be something you planned that day or that week or that month or that year, but just know that once you get through it, you'll have a whole new perspective on how to continue on that journey.
Love it. I'll maybe circle back to just kind of enjoying the journey piece of it. Is once I started just enjoying the ride and having fun in the process and doing things that were great, but that also were moving me in a direction that I liked. I liked the opportunities that opened up because of whatever I was doing, podcasting being one of those things. Once I was able to invest in the moment, and sometimes that investment was not enjoyable. Let's make that clear. Sometimes editing a podcast at 10:30 at night before the show's supposed to come out the next day, not enjoyable. But making some of those investments in the enjoyable parts of that, which is kind of talking with you guys, right? This is awesome. I love this. This fills me up. Okay. And then the back end of that, what comes of this? What comes because we're creating this community? What comes because we're sharing this with an audience? All of that to me is exciting, is really cool where that's headed. And so my recommendation for people is obviously lean into every acronym that we come up with on the show, embrace being our latest. But the enjoyment piece of that, I think, is critical, is make sure that you're setting yourself up for enjoyment now. Maybe not today, but hopefully tomorrow, or at least the next day. Okay, set yourself up for some enjoyment on a regular basis, but make sure that that trajectory is headed towards more joy in your future, more opportunity in your future. Be building towards something.
I like this comment here. Journey was my first concert. Carrier Dome 1983.
Yeah, let's
go. We should have been talking about the band this whole time. Did we get the wrong memo?
The audience probably do. We got the wrong memo. I was stalling. I was trying to come up with an acronym. I didn't come up with anything. I did realize I'm wearing. This is a shirt, Victorious. It's got Grateful on the back. A friend of mine, Nick Anastasio. I think I've brought him up in a previous, time here. But for anyone who hasn't heard of Nick Anastasio, look him up. He's fantastic. He was born with one limb, so he has no legs. He has no arm, and then his other arm, he has no hand. It's like a stub. And clearly he had limitations. And nowadays he's a multimillionaire. Currently, at this moment, he's touring as an opener for Tony Robbins. He's in his mid-20s, and he's already affecting millions of people. Brilliant guy. And what he says is, if I can do it, you can too. If he can do it with those cards stacked against him, we can do it too. We don't have to go through that journey to still get the message and achieve what we're trying to achieve. So I'll just lean into that. If that man can do it, why can't we?
Yeah, he sounds like a cool dude. And I can't think of a better way to wrap up this show Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you for your great contributions. Your contributions were incredible. I can't wait to maybe have one of you on the next show and then another one of you on the next show, because we can have more people to contribute from your own experiences. This has been the Lunch Break ABCs. Our next letter, I believe, will be, if this was J, then K, right? So Christine,
I had to run through it in my head. I had to run through the letters.
I already ran through it, so I seemed a little bit smarter, but I did have to go through all of them. So K will be our next letter. You will vote on the topic, so be on the lookout for that poll coming to you soon, and we will see you next month. Thanks for tuning in. We'll talk to you guys soon.